The original Fujifilm X100 is essentially the closest thing you can get to shooting film with a digital camera in 2021. So this video is not going to be a full review of this camera. I'm not going to go over the spec list and all that sort of stuff. I'm just going to talk about what this camera is like to use. I want to show you a bunch of photo examples that I've taken with it. And I basically want to tell you why this is basically the closest thing to shooting film without having to actually invest in a film camera and invest in a film for it. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. So this is the X100. It has a 23mm f2 lens, which is a full frame equivalent of about 35mm. This is a really standard focal length, and personally for me it's my favorite focal length. It's definitely not telephoto, but it's also not super wide. It's right at that middle point where you can pretty much get any type of picture you need, whether it's a portrait or a landscape or just any sort of street photography. So this camera was released in 2010, so it has Fujifilm's old 12mm X-Trans sensor. And this is one of the reasons why I think this camera really gives that film look with its images. The 12 megapixel older X-Trans sensor obviously isn't one of these new 40, 50, or even 60 megapixel sensors that are in all these new cameras. So any photos taken out of this camera don't look overly sharp or overly digitized. It has such an organic look coming out of it, and this old sensor they use in this is seriously awesome. And that's not to say you can't get sharp, good looking images out of this, because you can get some clean images with this camera still. Of course it's going to be nothing compared to like the new Sony A1 or Canon R5 when it comes to low light performance, dynamic range, and all that sort of stuff. But then again, neither is a film camera. You're never going to get perfect images out of a film camera, and that's the reason that they're so good and why so many people love them. And so next up, this camera is really slow. And that's another reason why I think this camera is so similar to a film camera. You know, to get to a certain shutter speed, you have to look up at this dial, turn this dial to whatever shutter speed you want, make sure it's in focus, make sure it's exposed correctly. The autofocus itself is pretty slow, but it still works really good. Once it locks on, it's definitely locked on. You know, check your settings, check exposure, check focus, and then you can take the picture. Now this might sound like a bad thing. I might be exaggerating a little bit. It really doesn't take like 5 minutes to get a single photo, but I'm just trying to clarify that this camera is slow to work. But because of how slow it is and how much effort you have to put into to get a picture with this, you really fall in love with each picture you take, and each picture has its own story behind it. You know, you work to get every photo out of this camera. Next up, this camera has film simulations built into it. So Fujifilm has put a lot of time and effort into building these film simulations to put in their cameras that almost perfectly match the film stocks that they're going for. Now the newer Fujifilm cameras like the X-T4 and the X100V are going to have the most options when it comes to film simulation, but the original X100 still has quite a few built into it. So first of all, it has the standard Provia, it has Velvia, which is the vivid, Astio, which is soft, monochrome with a yellow filter, monochrome with a red filter, with a green filter, and sepia. So again, it's not a huge selection built in, but each one of these will give a unique tone and unique look to the image. And personally, I really like the Astio, the soft. I think it looks really good, really natural. That's basically what I've used for all the images I've taken with this. So at this point, I'm sure you've seen a bunch of photo examples. This isn't a full review or anything like that. I just wanted to bring some light to this camera and talk about why I love it so much and why it just feels so raw and so nice to use. So if you're looking for a camera that you really want to connect with and just take some good looking photos, you know, something that you can really connect with and just use on such like a personal level rather than it just feeling like a tool, I think the X100 is an awesome option. You can find it for pretty cheap nowadays, like around $300 or even less, and it still produces some great looking photos. But that wraps this video up. If you want to see more videos about this or a full review or like a tutorial about the best settings for it, definitely leave a comment down below and like this video and subscribe to my channel. I have a bunch more videos about budget filmmaking and photography, cameras and gear, so definitely check out my other videos if you're interested in those as well. And that wraps this video up. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.